Hello and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that wonders why Margaret Thatcher wasn't included in the Avengers. Because she was known as the Iron Lady. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, once in a generation, a tabletop game comes along that transcends the medium of mere entertainment and becomes part of our shared cultural heritage. But enough about Justin Bieber Backstage Pass. Today we're going to talk about Star Wars Armada from Fantasy Flight Games.
From ancient Greek mythology to Roman lore as well, there's a creature kind of creepy, but he's got some sex appeal. He stands at 9'7" and you never hear him talk. He's only got one eye, but he really likes to rock. They say he burned the village, that's so what if he did? Don't be so judgmental about the Cyclops kid. He's got a tiny temper and an itty-bitty fuse. If you're the one who lit it, then you're probably gonna lose. Mysterious and mighty with a really killer mind. Lives in a volcano making weapons for the gods. They say he ain't a baby, so what if he did? Don't be so judgmental about the Cyclops kid.
In Star Wars Armada from Fantasy Flight Games, two players are going to take on the roles of either the evil Galactic Empire or the brave heroes of the Rebel Alliance. Now, the game comes with a host of capital ships. This is a game of capital ship combat, and it's quite a bit different from X-Wing. If you played the X-Wing miniatures game, that has a very, very distinct feel to it, and this game is going to feel quite a bit different. Now what you're going to do is you're going to squad build, kind of the same way you do in X-Wing miniatures. Of course, here we've only got the core set out so far. Hopefully before long we'll get those expansions out here, and then the squad building will become more and more important. Now in the core set, it comes simply with either a Victory-class Star Destroyer, Rebel Nebulon B frigate, or a Rebel Corellian Corvette. And each one of those ships has kind of two different types, two different cards that give it different stats, and they have different costs for squad building associated with it. Additionally, the core set comes with 6 TIE Fighter squadrons and 4 X-Wing squadrons, and you can buy those squadrons to also field along with your capital ships. Now, like other Fantasy Flight games too, the game also comes with a mountain of upgrade cards, rules explanation cards. It comes with tokens and chits and all sorts of goodies. You also get rangefinders for weapons and the TIE Fighter squadrons, and you also get a maneuver tool for the capital ships. Now, the game takes place over the course of 6 rounds, or until somebody is defeated, and each round has 4 phases to it. Now, your very first phase is your command phase. Now, during the command phase, you're actually going to use these command dials. Now, these things are, you use the dial to select a specific tactic, and then you hide it. In that sense, it's kind of similar to choosing your maneuvers in Star Wars X-Wing. But it is quite a bit different because you're not choosing your movement here. You're choosing a specific tactic. So the tactics you can choose from are things like concentrate your firepower, meaning you can roll an extra dice in combat that turn. You can activate your squadrons out of sequence, essentially move and attack with them early, which may give you a tactical advantage. You can choose to repair, essentially spend repair points from your ship to either recharge shields or move shields around or do some other funky things. And then, of course, finally, you can change your speed. And that's going to be very important because in this game, the capital ships have to move at whatever speed they're at, and that can cause problems. So you've got to prepare carefully. Now, each capital ship has a number of maneuver dials. For instance, the Corellian Corvette only has 1 maneuver dial. Every turn, he's just going to adjust it to whatever he wants. The Nebulon B frigate has 2 maneuver dials, so it's got to think 1 turn ahead. And the Star Destroyer, because it's so big, it's so massive, it's so powerful, but it's so slow, it's got 3 dials, meaning you have to plan 3 moves ahead, or at least up to 2 moves ahead every round. At the beginning, you set all your maneuver dials, you stack them, And then what you're going to do is during the ship phase, which comes up next, you're going to go ahead and reveal your top maneuver dial. Now, you can either do what that maneuver wants you to do, meaning you can change your speed, you can initiate repairs, you can concentrate firepower, you can activate the squadrons, or you can take a token that has that similar icon on it. Now, if you take the token, you can spend that at a later time to activate it, but it's not as powerful as if you're using the actual dial. You're going to place the dial on your ship card to kind of indicate that you've actually done your command for that turn. Now, after you have done your tactic that turn, your command tactic, then your ship is going to be able to fire twice and then move. Now, when you're firing here, combat is very, very cool because when you fire, you pick one of your arcs. The ship has two side arcs and a bow and a stern arc. You pick which arc you're firing from, you pick a target, and you determine what arc you're firing into. And that's important too because each of the arcs also has a shield rating. So you've got shields that have different values all around the sides of your ship. So when you attack another ship, you can actually damage its shields on that particular side. When you roll the dice, of course, you have black dice, which are for close range, very powerful. Red dice that can fire further. They are probably your most common dice. And then you also have blue dice, which are going to have some important effects here as well. If you're rolling against fighters, for instance, you're just going to be rolling the blue dice. If you're rolling against capital ships, you may roll a combination of these dice. Now, the symbols you can roll are a hit, a critical hit, a negation of defense tokens, or nothing at all. If you hit a ship with its shields down, they will have to take a face down damage card. If you hit the ship with its shields down with a critical hit, they will have to take a face up damage card, which of course, like in Star Wars X-Wing, is going to cripple the ship in some way. Now the defender during an attack is going to have some options. It's not like in Star Wars X-Wing where you simply kind of roll a dice to negate hits. Rather, you have different defense tokens. For instance, you have Brace. If you spend that token, you can essentially have the number of attack points you got. So if they hit you with 5, you could round it down to 3. You can try to evade. If they hit you at long range, you can essentially cancel one of the attack dice. If it's a closer range, you can make them re-roll it. So there's different fun and interesting things. You can redirect. You can move shields from one side of the ship to another side of the ship. You spend these tokens from green, you flip them over to red, and then if they're on red, you can spend them again, but then they're out of the game. So there's a real cool strategic element to defending in combat here as well. Now also, some of the dice rolls can negate certain defense tokens. So if I were to roll a defense token negation, then I could choose which one of the defender's tokens I want to take out of play for that attack. And that can be very, very powerful. Now, after I have attacked twice with my capital ship, I move my capital ship. And this is done using the maneuver tool. Now, this thing, of course, it bends. And how that works is essentially your ship says how far it can move at what speeds, but how it can turn, what its yaw is. How many times can you bend the maneuver tool at, the 1 point, the 2 point, the 3 point. And depending on how you bend it, that's, of course, how you're going to move. Now, it's not a secret movement. You can actually get the tool out and measure where you want to go. And, in fact, you're probably going to have to do that more often than not in order to avoid collisions into various objects, other ships. If you do crash into another ship, you essentially would just move back one space, and you each take a face-down damage card. If you move into fighters, you just displace the fighters. The other player can choose where the fighters are going to be arranged, but they have to be touching that capital ship that displaced them. Now, after all of the ships, after you've alternated back and forth and all the ships have moved, then you go into the squadron phase. And here you alternate back and forth again. Now, the Rebel player typically has the initiative in the game, and he will activate 2 of his squadrons, and the Imperial will activate 2 of their squadrons, and then back and forth, back and forth. Each squadron has a little special slider that you can move from red to blue so that you can see that it's gone, and then you flip a token over to indicate, red or blue, what is gone at that point. But how you activate squadrons is essentially you can move them up to their speed anywhere in a 360 arc simply by measuring with the ruler from where they begin. Now, they can either move or attack in the squadron round. Now, if I had activated squadrons with my capital ship as part of my tactics, I could move and attack with them. They have to be within a certain distance of the ship to do that, and I can only activate so many depending on what my ship's kind of activation for squadrons points are. But generally, during the squadron phase, we can activate everything. They can either move or attack, but they can only attack if they are within range 1 of their target. So it's you have to move them, and then you can attack with them during the squadron phase, which can be very difficult. Now, critically, fighters can screen other fighters, which is really cool. Particularly, it's useful for the TIE fighters screening their ships, because X-Wings can be very powerful against capital ships. So how that works is, if you get your fighters within range 1 of another fighter, that other fighter cannot move. In fact, neither of the fighter squadrons can move. They have to remain there until they have destroyed the other fighter. They're engaged. They're in their own little battle there. And that is very cool as well. Now, once the squadron phase is over, all players go ahead and ready all their tokens. You flip over the initiative marker, which from red to blue or blue to red, and you also put out another token indicating what round you are going to be in. Now, the game continues like that for 6 rounds. At the end of 6 rounds, whoever's destroyed the most ships wins the game, or if all of one side's capital ships have been destroyed prior to that, then whoever destroyed those ships wins the game. Now, that is just a bare, basic overview of Armada. I really didn't discuss things like, at the beginning of the game, you could actually choose kind of scenarios. One side chooses different kinds of scenarios, and then the other player gets to pick the actual scenario that's going to be fought. That adds a very kind of story element to the game. It kind of makes it a little deeper, a little more interesting, adds some flavor to the game, which is awesome, so you're not playing the same game over and over again, simply destroy everybody else. Some of the other things, capital ships roll certain dice to attack other capital ships, and then they roll kind of only a few blue dice to attack fighters, almost kind of like an anti-aircraft barrage gun, which is very cool. Fighters themselves have some interesting advantages. They are going to roll a number of blue dice when they attack other fighters, but again, very, very few dice when they actually attack capital ships. Also, TIE fighters have a swarm ability, which allow 2 or more TIE fighters that are engaged with a target to re-roll 1 die. X-Wings have bomber abilities, so there's some really good and fun and interesting tactical choices and tactical abilities with each of the different fighter squadrons in the game. So on the surface, Star Wars Armada really does look like just a capital ship version of Star Wars X-Wing miniatures. It is not. This is a very, very different game. Now, when Star Trek Attack Wing first came out, and it kind of borrowed the mechanics from Star Wars X-Wing, they said it was going to be a kind of capital ship version of X-Wing, and to some extent it succeeded. The ships did feel a little more sluggish. There was more of an emphasis on just slugging it out rather than maneuver and evasion, and that was very cool. And I did think Star Trek Attack Wing did manage to make more of a capital ship version of the X-Wing system. But Armada just seems like it's the next generation of this kind of game. And this really, really feels like capital ship combat. These starships are slow, they are sluggish. It's a very different way you're moving because your movements aren't hidden. And critically, the way they fight and take damage is very, very cool and interesting. I love the tactical decisions you have as the defender. How am I best going to try to defend against this attack? And sometimes you really don't have any options. You just kind of have to take it. But you have sometimes really some cool options that I really enjoy there. Also, I really enjoy the different shields, how each side has its own shield. That is so cool, and how you can move your shields around with some of the actions and the repair. It's very cool. It's very fun, and it adds a whole other layer of on one hand, it's a little more complex, but it's so much more rich and so much more rewarding to play this kind of game. You feel like you're on the bridge of these starships, and you're ordering damage control, and you're ordering, we got to concentrate firepower, or let's send the squadrons out there. You really do feel like you're a fleet admiral in one of these battles. And this is when I was a kid, my favorite part of the Star Wars films were the space battles. I loved the end of Jedi with those space battles around the Death Star. I thought that was just amazing. I loved that as a kid. And this brings that to the table in a very cool, very fun, very interesting and unique way. So Fantasy Flight Games has given us no shortage of Star Wars games. There's the Star Wars role-playing game, Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures, Star Wars Imperial Assault, Star Wars the card game.
Don't forget Empire versus Rebellion.
Thanks, Boba. And one wonders, is Fantasy Flight kind of flooding the market? I mean, are they saturating the market with these Star Wars brands, and are people going to do it? They recently announced the next wave of X-Wing, which looks really cool, but are people going to be investing in Armada and investing in X-Wing? Because I've invested pretty heavily in X-Wing. I like X-Wing. I think it's a fantastic game. But I wonder if I'm going to be able to keep up with X-Wing, because I got to tell you, I'm kind of more excited about Armada. I think it's a more strategic game, and that excites me more. So I don't know if I'm going to be keeping up with both of them here. I don't know if I'm going to keep keeping up with all the ally packs for Imperial Assault. I love them, and maybe I will, but I don't know. It's just, there's just so much, and there's only so many dollars that I, a humble educator, have. So I'm really kind of a little bit concerned just about the saturation of the market here. But that being said, it's all good stuff. Now, I haven't played all the Star Wars games, but everyone I have played, I have freaking loved. I think Fantasy Flight Games just does a bang-up job. So long story short, Star Wars Armada has it all. It's my favorite Star Wars-themed tabletop game. For me, for my money, Armada blows out of the park. I'm so excited to see the future Starship expansions they bring to this thing. It's got so much potential, and I am just absolutely thrilled with Star Wars Armada. So, of course, what else am I going to say here? This is an absolute no-brainer for the discriminating gamer. Star Wars Armada from Fantasy Flight Games. Buy it!
He fought Kronos, the mighty titan, in a battle most exciting. Made a trident for Poseidon, and helped make Zeus his bolts of lightning.
Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and Star Wars Armada, you want this, don't you?
Zeus freed him from Hades, yes it did. So you better never, ever, ever mess with a Cyclops kid. 1, 2, 3, 4!
Sean, I gotta tell you, I really love that Uncle Sam outfit and the way you've really gotten into the spirit of this game.
Thanks, Cody. And I like how you've really gotten into the spirit of the game with your drab, humble, communist clothing, your round, Khrushchev-like face, that blank stare that just screams public education, your propensity to always split the bill perfectly even, although we know that you ate more onion rings than the rest of us, and your unwillingness to name names even though you are full aware who egged my car last week, and your complete lack of overall hygiene that will ensure that no one ever loves you. You have really, really brought the whole feel of communism to the table. Well, anyway, on with the review.
Yeah, let's review the game now.